Have you ever walked away from a conversation, feeling completely drained, like you gave too much, said too much, tried too hard, and yet somehow, you were still the one at fault? That sinking, exhausted feeling might not be random, it might be the residue of emotional manipulation, the kind only a narcissist can deliver with a smile. Narcissists don't scream, they don't need to, their power lies in subtle warfare, where your guilt becomes their shield, and your empathy becomes the rope they slowly tighten. Here's how it works: you set a boundary, you say no, or I need space, or this makes me uncomfortable. But instead of respect, you get a performance. Suddenly, you are the problem, you're too sensitive. You're abandoning me. You used to be different. They twist your intentions, until you question your own decency, and over time, you stop setting boundaries, not because you don't want to, but because you're afraid of the storm they'll create when you do. That's not love, that's manipulation. But here's the twist: narcissists aren't invincible, they only thrive in environments where you don't question the script. I learned this the hard way. I once had a friend who always made me feel guilty for not picking up the phone. The moment I said I need space, I became the villain in his story. That was my wake-up call. The moment I realized silence speaks louder than explanation, there's one question, a single, calm sentence, that can quietly shatter their illusion: why does my boundary make you angry? That's it, that one question pulls the curtain, because it reveals the truth: they were never interested in connection, only control. This isn't about starting a war, it's about reclaiming your peace, it's about recognizing what's happening, before you lose yourself in it. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That quote isn't just philosophy, it's survival. Stoicism teaches you how to separate what's yours from what's theirs, their mood. Not yours, their anger. Not yours, their attempts to make you feel like the villain. Still, not yours. You don't need to explode, attack, or prove anything. In fact, that's what they want, because every reaction feeds their game. You win by staying still, you win by seeing clearly, you win by not needing their approval to choose yourself. So the next time you feel guilt for protecting your peace, ask yourself, am I setting a boundary? Or am I being controlled for trying? Because the moment you choose clarity over chaos, you stop being their supply, and start being your own protector, and that's power. Write that question down, keep it in your notes. The next time it happens, ask it. To understand how to protect yourself from a narcissist, you first have to understand how they think. And here's the brutal truth: a narcissist doesn't want love the way you understand it. They want worship. They don't seek connection, they seek control. At the core, they carry a belief: I am superior, I deserve special treatment, I don't need to care how others feel. That's not just confidence, that's entitlement, laced with emotional blindness. You see, empathy, the ability to truly feel with another human being, is either deeply underdeveloped in them, or entirely missing. In relationships, this shows up fast. What begins as charm, slowly becomes a power game. You'll notice, conversations always bend toward them. I once dated someone who never let me celebrate a win. If I shared good news, they'd change the subject, or make it about them. I didn't realize it at the time, but that was the start of my voice fading. Your emotions are invalidated, your achievements are dismissed, and worst of all, your boundaries are treated like insults. Why? Because in their world, boundaries mean loss of control, and that's unacceptable. The Stoics understood this kind of person long before modern psychology put a name to it. Marcus Aurelius warned us clearly in Meditations. You will meet people who are meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. but they are like this because they do not know good from evil. He was talking about narcissists, people consumed by ego, with no compass for mutual respect. But here's the Stoic edge: we don't fight ego with more ego, we don't try to fix them, we train our response, because as Epictetus taught, your mind is complicit in the provocation. Think about that: the moment they push your buttons, when they guilt you, provoke you, or demand endless justifications for your choices, your reaction becomes their fuel. They want you to snap, they want you to defend, they want you to spiral. Because the more you react, the more they control the emotional field. This is their strategy: guilt-tripping, constantly needing explanations, twisting words, to make you feel like the villain, and slowly, your energy drains, your confidence erodes, your voice becomes quieter, until one day, you ask yourself, how did I get here? But here's the shift: what if you didn't need their validation? What if their chaos couldn't enter your peace? What if their manipulation simply bounced off your mental armor? That's the power of Stoicism. It teaches you to see clearly, without emotion clouding the facts. It teaches you that while you can't change who they are, you can master how you engage. You can observe. Instead of absorb, you can detach. Instead of defend, you can say less, and mean more. The game ends when you stop playing. So the next time someone tries to twist your truth, remember, you don't owe them your energy. You don't owe them your reaction. You owe yourself your peace. Because once you control your mind, no one else can. Sometimes, the biggest danger isn't the person who screams at you, it's the one who slowly makes you doubt your own mind. If you've ever walked away from a conversation, feeling confused, guilty, or like you've somehow become the villain in your own story, you might not be too sensitive. You might be standing in the shadow of a narcissist. Let's break this down. The first red flag: entitlement. A narcissist often carries this unspoken belief: I deserve more than others, I deserve special treatment, and if I don't get it, someone's going to pay. It shows up in small moments: cutting in line, disregarding your time, or reacting with rage when you say no. Rejection doesn't just bruise their ego, it threatens their identity. Then comes the second warning: lack of empathy. When you're hurt, they shrug it off. When you're vulnerable, they roll their eyes. They don't listen to understand, they listen to deflect. They twist the narrative until you feel responsible for their bad behavior. Ever told someone how they made you feel, only for them to say, "You're too emotional"? That never happened. I once told a partner that I felt hurt when they dismissed me in front of friends. Instead of hearing me, they laughed and said I was making things up. That's when I realized, it wasn't miscommunication, it was control. That's not miscommunication, that's gaslighting, a psychological tactic designed to warp your reality, until you second-guess your memories, your feelings, even your identity. And here's the trickiest part: they don't always come off as cruel. Sometimes they're charming, articulate, even generous, but their kindness is conditional, weaponized to earn your trust, only to exploit it later. They feed on admiration like it's oxygen, but no amount of praise is ever enough. They crave to be seen as extraordinary, and if you don't feed that image, they'll punish you, with silence, with sarcasm, with withdrawal. This isn't love, this is a performance, and if you're not applauding loudly enough, they'll make you feel disposable. So how do you know for sure? Set a boundary, say no, protect your time, and then, watch what happens next. A healthy person, they might ask questions. A narcissist, they'll get defensive, they'll guilt-trip you. Or worse, they'll spin the entire situation, to make you look like the problem. You'll hear things like, "Wow, you've changed. I guess I can't say anything around you anymore." Or the classic, "So now I'm the bad guy." Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "When you are offended at any man's fault, turn to yourself and study your own failings, then you will forget your anger." But here's the nuance: this wisdom is for self-reflection, not self-blame. You are not at fault for someone else's manipulation, you're responsible for your response, not their behavior. The moment you stop making excuses for their cruelty is the moment you reclaim your clarity. Remember, people reveal who they are. Not when things are easy, but when you tell them no. So ask yourself, who gets angry when you honor your own worth? Who twists your boundaries into betrayal? Because once you identify the pattern, you can break free from it. You can return to yourself. You can breathe again, and that is where your power begins. Here's the thing about narcissists: they can manipulate for months, even years. But there's one question, just one, that cuts through the performance, like a blade. A single question, that doesn't accuse, doesn't shout, but reveals. It forces the mask to crack, and the question is this: can you explain why your needs always seem to matter more than mine? Or, for moments when they've clearly crossed a line, how do you feel about dismissing my boundaries just to satisfy your own desires? Simple, right? But don't let that fool you. This isn't just a question, it's a mirror. It reflects their behavior without dramatizing it. It invites accountability without emotion. And for a narcissist, that's intolerable. Now, what happens next? That's where the truth comes out. There are 3 typical reactions, and if you see any of these, consider it confirmation. First, anger. They might explode. They'll attack your character, mock your question, maybe even raise their voice. This reaction isn't about you, it's about loss of control. They feel exposed, and their ego goes into defense mode. Second, denial. They'll pretend not to understand. They'll twist your words, accuse you of making things up. That's classic gaslighting. You'll hear things like, "Why are you being so dramatic? That's not what happened." Their goal? To confuse you, because if you're confused, you're easier to control. Third, victimhood. They'll sigh deeply, look hurt, say, "I guess nothing I do is ever good enough for you." They'll make you feel guilty for daring to ask a question rooted in truth. Sound familiar? I remember once asking someone why they always dismissed my needs. Instead of answering, they laughed and called me dramatic. That moment told me everything I needed to know. Now let's take a step back, because this is where Stoicism enters the picture. The ancient Stoics taught us not to react emotionally to provocation, not to be drawn into someone else's chaos. Marcus Aurelius put it best: the best revenge is not to be like your enemy. So when you ask this question, your job isn't to debate, it's not to defend yourself, it's simply to observe. Watch how they react, not what they say, but how they say it. Do they meet you with curiosity and care, or do they punish you for asking? Because here's the truth: a person who genuinely respects you may feel surprised, but they'll listen. A narcissist? They'll deflect, attack, or guilt trip. This question isn't designed to change them, it's designed to reveal them. And once you see clearly, you regain control. That clarity, it's a weapon, it's protection, it's peace. You don't need to explain your worth. You don't need to debate your boundaries, you only need to trust what the reaction reveals. As Epictetus said, when someone provokes you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. Don't let them drag you into their emotional storm. Stand firm, stay silent if needed, let their behavior speak louder than your words ever could, because in the end, the strongest stance isn't shouting back, it's knowing exactly who you're dealing with, and choosing not to become like them. Here's a truth most of us aren't taught: boundaries aren't walls. They're not about pushing people away, they're about teaching others how to treat you with clarity, not conflict. And when you're dealing with manipulation, especially from Someone with narcissistic traits, boundaries aren't just important, they're survival. But here's the catch, most people struggle with boundaries, because they confuse firmness with cruelty. They worry they'll seem cold, selfish, but Stoicism teaches us the opposite. A true boundary doesn't need an apology, doesn't need justification, it simply is. Let's start here. A boundary is not a punishment, it's a definition of what is and isn't acceptable in your life. It's not about controlling others, it's about controlling your response. So how do we put this into action? Let's say someone crosses a line. Maybe it's a friend who always makes jokes at your expense. You've laughed it off before, but this time, you just say, "Don't speak to me that way." And suddenly, the air changes. You didn't yell, you just showed them the line, instead of saying, "I feel uncomfortable when you talk to me like that." Which opens the door to debate, or emotional manipulation. Try this, "Don't speak to me that way." Clear, calm, direct, no emotional flare-up, no explaining, no asking for permission to feel how you feel. The Stoics understood this kind of strength. They believed in restraint, not as weakness, but as discipline. Seneca said it best, "He who has great power should use it lightly." And personal boundaries, that's where your power lives. So when your boundary gets ignored, which often happens, what then? Repeat it, without emotion, not with frustration, not with fear, just with clarity. Every time they test you, you show them something stronger than anger, self-command. And this is where Stoicism separates itself from reactive modern culture. You're not here to out-yell them, you're not here to win a debate, you're here to own your space. When you set boundaries this way, you stop negotiating your worth. You stop playing defense. You become the authority of your own inner world. And here's something powerful to remember. A narcissist wants you to explain, they need you to get emotional, because that's where they can twist, confuse, control. So don't give them that. You're not cold for protecting your peace, you're not heartless for choosing dignity over dysfunction. You're wise, you're practicing emotional sovereignty. That means your peace isn't up for negotiation. As Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. When you embrace Stoicism, you stop reacting and start choosing. Choosing silence when it's strategic, choosing clarity over conflict, choosing peace over performance. So ask yourself now, where have you been negotiating boundaries that should have been non-negotiable? What would it look like if you stopped explaining yourself, and simply stood your ground? Because sometimes, the most powerful thing you can say isn't loud, it's just this, "No," said once, said calmly, and never taken back. Now that we understand what narcissistic behavior looks like, and how Stoicism empowers us to protect our peace, let's bring this into the real world. Because it's one thing to talk about boundaries in theory, it's another to hold them up when it actually matters. At work, at home, in love, or even with people you once called friends. Let's start with the workplace. You have a coworker who constantly shifts their responsibilities onto you. They smile while they do it, maybe even flatter you for being so reliable. But deep down, you know you're being used, instead of blowing up. Instead of silently resenting it, try this. Can you explain why my workload is less important than yours? It's not emotional, it's not defensive, it's a direct question, one that demands accountability. And that's the power of Stoic strategy. You bring truth to the surface, without chaos. Let's shift to family. Sometimes the people who should support us the most don't. They criticize, under the guise of just being honest. They guilt trip, instead of listening, and over time, you start to doubt your worth. The Stoic approach, not to argue, not to cry for validation, just ask, How do you feel when you criticize others instead of offering support? You don't need them to agree. You're giving them a mirror, and if they can't look into it, that's not your burden. Now let's talk love. In relationships, narcissistic dynamics can be even more subtle, because they hide behind intimacy. Maybe you share how something made you feel, and suddenly you're the problem. You're too sensitive. You always overreact. Sound familiar? A Stoic response isn't silence or submission, it's this: can you explain why my emotions don't matter in this relationship? Notice the structure. You're not yelling, you're not begging, you're calmly inviting them to reveal the truth about how little they value your inner world, and sometimes, that's all it takes. To see things clearly, let me share something personal. There was someone I considered a close friend, but over time, I realized every conversation was about them, their problems, their triumphs, my stories, skipped over, dismissed. One day, I asked them gently, can you explain why my experiences never seem to matter in our conversations? They froze, no answer, just awkward silence, and in that silence, I found the answer I'd been avoiding. That friendship ended, but the weight of pretending was lifted, and I'll be honest, it hurt, but it also healed, because the truth is, when you ask the right question, you don't just expose them, you reveal yourself. Your values, your clarity, your strength, that's what Stoicism gives you, not the power to control others, but the wisdom to see them as they are, and the courage to walk away, when needed. So ask yourself, is there someone in your life, who always dodges accountability, who drains your energy, but never sees your worth? Maybe the question isn't, how can I fix this? Maybe it's, why am I still shrinking to make space for someone who never makes space for me? Because sometimes, the most radical act of self-respect, is to stop shrinking, for someone who refuses to grow. If someone treats you with disrespect, don't be reduced by it, let it reveal them, not define you. And when you do that, everything changes. So, what do you actually do, when you realize you're dealing with a narcissist? What do you do, when their charm starts to crack, and you see the control behind the kindness, the manipulation behind the words? Here's the answer most people don't want to hear. You don't fight fire with fire, you fight it with stillness, with clarity, with strategy. Let me walk you through a few key principles that Stoicism teaches us, because the goal isn't to win the argument, it's to win back your peace. First, stay calm, not just on the outside, but inside. When they push your buttons, bait you into emotional reactions, twist your words, don't engage. They want to hijack your nervous system, but your silence, your composure, that's power they can't touch. Second, don't over-explain. This is important. Narcissists feed on information. The more you explain, justify, try to make them understand, the more ammo you give them to twist the story, blame you, play the victim. So when you speak, be direct, be brief, be clear, say what needs to be said, then stop. You're not responsible for whether they accept it, only for saying it with dignity. Third, if they deflect, deny, or explode, say nothing. That's right, nothing. Silence isn't weakness, silence is strategy. When a narcissist realizes they can't control your emotional response, they start to lose their grip. Sometimes, silence is the loudest boundary you can set. Now here's a hard truth. You are not responsible for fixing them, you are not responsible for saving them, or making them see the light. Let me repeat that, because it's something empaths, people pleasers, and kind-hearted souls need to hear over and over. You are not responsible for changing anyone who refuses to change themselves. Your only job, protect your clarity, protect your energy, protect your peace. As the Stoics teach, don't tie your happiness to external behavior, tie it to internal discipline. That's the ultimate move. You walk away, not out of anger, but out of strength. You go quiet, not out of fear, but out of mastery. You hold your boundary, not to punish them, but to honor yourself. And over time, you'll see, you don't need to scream to be heard. You don't need to convince anyone to respect you. You just need to stop shrinking, to fit inside broken dynamics. So if you're dealing with someone who constantly makes you question your worth, your memories, your emotions, ask yourself, what would it look like to protect my peace, even if it disappoints them? That's the question that flips the power, because in the end, narcissists only thrive where they can dominate. When you stop reacting, they lose control. When you protect your peace, they lose access. When you rise quietly, they fall into silence, because power is never loud, it's just unshakable. The best revenge is not to be like your enemy. Marcus Aurelius. Now, let's get practical. When someone's trying to manipulate you, whether it's a partner, a boss, a parent, or even a friend, the real battlefield isn't the conversation. It's your emotions. Narcissists and manipulators don't need facts. They don't care about reason. What they're hunting is control, and the fastest way they get it is by triggering your emotional reactivity. So here's your first line of defense: stay calm, not just for show, but truly calm, inside, because the more emotionally neutral you become, the less power they have. You stop being a puppet on their string. Let me put it like this: when you react with anger, frustration, or desperation, they win. But when you respond with composure, short, steady, grounded responses, you shift the power dynamic instantly. Imagine this: someone tries to provoke you with guilt. They say, "After all I've done for you, this is how you repay me." Now, imagine that same guilt coming from someone closer, like a parent. They might say, "You've changed. You're not the same child I raised." The old you might have crumbled under that weight, but the centered you take a breath and say, "I'm learning to be who I really am. I hope you can accept that, but I'll be okay even if you don't." That's not rebellion, that's self-respect. Now, the old you might have scrambled to explain, to defend, to over-apologize, but the wise version of you, the Stoic version, pauses, and simply replies, "I hear your perspective, but this decision still stands." No explanation, no over-talking, no justifying. Why? Because the more you talk, the more you feed their strategy. Manipulators twist your words, they take your honesty, and weaponize it. So instead, be brief, be clear, be done. Now, sometimes, they'll escalate, they'll dodge your question, they'll stonewall you, or explode with anger. In those moments, don't chase, don't argue, just go silent. It feels counterintuitive, right? But here's what most people don't realize. Silence is power. When you don't feed their chaos with your attention, they lose their grip. It's like cutting off the oxygen from a fire. You don't need to slam doors. You don't need to shout boundaries. Sometimes the most powerful move is to say nothing and walk away. And here's the hardest truth of all: you are not responsible for fixing them. Read that again. Their pain, their unresolved childhood wounds, their refusal to look in the mirror, it's not yours to carry. It's not yours to heal. The only person you are responsible for is you, your peace, your mental clarity, your emotional boundaries. As the Stoics teach, first, say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. Epictetus. So the next time someone tries to twist your reality, push your buttons, turn the spotlight back on you, don't take the bait. Don't defend yourself with essays. Don't prove your worth to someone committed to misunderstanding you. Don't argue with a person whose goal is to win, not to connect. Instead, breathe, pause, answer once, with strength and calm, and then disengage. That's how you reclaim your time, your energy, your power, because emotional control, that's the real dominance. As Marcus Aurelius said, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And that is the gift of clarity. You stop overvaluing the noise, and start honoring your own inner stillness, and that, my friend, is what makes you unshakable. Here's the truth. No one tells you soon enough, you will never be able to change a narcissist, not with logic, not with love, not even with all the patience in the world, but what you can change, is your reaction, and that changes everything. The moment you stop trying to get them to understand you, the moment you stop chasing closure, validation, or fairness, you shift the power back to yourself. That's the essence of Stoicism. You don't control the world, you don't control their behavior. But you do control how you respond, and that is real freedom. Let's talk strategy. One of the most powerful things you can do when dealing with manipulation is to recognize the pattern. Not emotionally, intellectually, see it, label it, because once you understand the game, you stop playing it. Let's say you're in a conversation with a partner, you set a healthy boundary, something like, "I don't feel comfortable being yelled at during arguments." And they reply, "Oh, so now I can't express myself, I guess nothing I say matters anymore." In the past, you might have panicked, over-explained, tried to soothe them, but now, you pause, you respond, calmly, "Can you explain why my boundary offends you, more than your behavior hurts me?" Simple, clear, direct, and then, you let the silence speak. If they dodge, explode, or shut down, they've answered the question. Without saying a word, they've revealed themselves, because here's the thing, manipulators unravel, when you don't flinch, when you stay grounded, and make them sit in the weight of their own logic, or lack of it. That's where Stoicism becomes your shield. You don't react, you respond. You don't chase, you observe. You don't try to fix them, you protect your peace. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Marcus Aurelius, you don't owe anyone access to your mental space, just because they share your blood, your past, or your bed. You have the right to guard your peace like a fortress, to say no, to walk away, to choose stillness over chaos, even when it's disguised as love. So next time you find yourself in one of those draining conversations, where everything you say is twisted, minimized, or ignored, remember this: you don't need to prove yourself, you don't need to fix them, you don't even need to stay, you just need to see clearly, to pause, to let truth, not emotion, guide your next move. And when you do that, no one can manipulate your peace again. That's Stoicism in action. That's emotional self-defense. That's how you become unshakable. Protect your peace, not with force, but with clarity, not with noise, but with silence. That's the power they never see coming.